I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine today. He is a wise old friend who lives in the forest. And when I say old, I mean he's really old. He is 3,000 years old. His name is General Sherman. This is him right here. And he is a giant sequoia tree that lives in California's Sequoia National Park. He has the distinction of being the oldest single-stem tree on Earth, 3,000 years old. And he is an amazing teacher for us. He has weathered countless storms over 3,000 years, fires, floods, earthquakes, droughts, any possible unimaginable storm he has weathered. And he's come through it on the other side, stronger and more powerful every time. Pretty impressive, right? He's got these roots that weave their way through the earth's soils, gripping it, strong, powerful, sturdy, trunk, 36 feet in diameter. That is the width of the stage I'm standing on. He's a massive tree, and he towers over the earth at 275 feet tall, with branches and leaves that weave their way through the changes in the weather patterns around it. He is an extraordinary teacher for all of us. Resilient, strong. He weathers all of this and comes through it on the other side, stronger and more powerful every time. Human beings, we can be like that too. We're resilient. We've been around a long time. We've endured. But we have a mind that conjures up all of these ideas about how life is supposed to unfold, how we're supposed to follow these scripts, expectations of what life is supposed to be. You know the scripts I'm talking about, right? We all know them. Go to school, get good grades, graduate from college, from your top college of choice, get a great job, make lots of money, meet somebody, fall in love, get married maybe, have children, and live happily ever after, right? Or something along the lines of that. If you follow a script in our culture, there aren't a lot of options for you. Well, what I would say to that is we can't really follow a script, can we? Because life will interrupt your carefully laid plans. Things don't always go the way we had planned. A job lays you off, the school of your choice doesn't accept you, relationships end, people get sick, people die. A pandemic happens, and it changes everything. And we're told, hey, you know what? Get on with it. Move on, just pick yourself up and keep going. But nobody ever tells you how to get on with it. Well, that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. How to break free from scripts, how to liberate yourself from expectations, from disappointment, and how to move through disruption. When I was young, I didn't have a school like this. I grew up at a time when it was important to conform to scripts. I grew up at a time that it wasn't cool to be a rebel. What was expected of you was to pretty much follow the rules. And that just wasn't me. I was kind of a rebel. I was kind of a misfit. I wanted to stand in front of my high school and protest things related to climate change and human rights at a time where people weren't doing that. I remember one time in high school, there was a huge, massive student-led protest that broke out on the other side of the world in Beijing, China's Tiananmen Square. Nearly 1 million students flocked to Tiananmen Square that year. And they stood in that square for over 6 weeks, protesting against their government. And this was at a time in a culture, in a country, where you were putting your life on the line if you pushed up against the government. So it was a really brave move for these students to do this. And I was glued to the news, so impressed with their bravery. And as they protested, government tanks lined the square in an attempt to intimidate them, to force them to disband. And they wore these black armbands, signaling their resistance. One man in particular stood fiercely, bravely, powerfully in front of those tanks, and I was so impressed with his courage that I, on the other side of the world, stood in front of my high school, handing out these black armbands in solidarity with them. A couple people took them, most people didn't. I really grew up in the wrong generation, but I didn't care, because what I cared about was people, and I cared about the planet. And I'm going to introduce to you these 3 F's today that will help you break from all those scripts that I mentioned earlier. The first one being, be fierce. I was fierce. I didn't care. I didn't care that anyone else was going to join me in this protest. Being fierce means you care about things outside of yourself. You care about things much bigger than who you are. You're willing to take risks to go beyond yourself because your contribution to the world matters, because it does matter. It does matter how we show up. So that's the first F. And if I had known about that earlier on in my life, boy, it would have saved me a lot of heartache and struggle. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to travel the world and disrupt. So I went off to college. I got accepted to this top journalism program. My father and I drove halfway across the country. I was so excited. I was so excited to be out there changing the world soon. As soon as I graduated, couldn't wait. And about 6 months into the program, 2 police officers showed up at my door, knocked on my door, handed me a piece of paper and said, "Call this number." So I called the number, and the gentleman on the other end of the line said, "I'm sorry, but I have to tell you this way, but your father has unexpectedly died." I dropped to the floor, shocked, devastated. It changed everything in my life in that very moment I heard those words. Suddenly, my protector had gone. He wasn't here to protect me. A father represents protection for their daughters, especially. And I lost that. I lost the sense of security that I had. And so I managed to think about, what is this going to mean for my life? And I thought, well, I don't feel as safe anymore. How am I going to take care of myself? Who's going to look after me? Suddenly, the world felt completely unsafe to me. And this idea of being this globe-trotting journalist felt like too big of a risk. So I changed my degree. I went down a very traditional corporate path. And I started to take jobs in companies I didn't believe in, doing jobs I didn't love. In fact, a lot of them I hated. And I kept conforming and conforming and conforming. Trying to stay safe, trying to stay small, hoping that things wouldn't hurt me, stay out of the way. And I really lost myself. And these little disruptions would happen from time to time. I didn't listen. I stayed rigid to this safe plan I had laid out. Until one day, an incredibly traumatic event turned my whole life upside down. a massive disruption. But this time, I listened to this inner voice that told me, maybe these disruptions are here to teach me something. Maybe they're here to help me learn. What I realized in that moment was that disruption was here to help me grow, to teach me something about life. So, what I realized in that moment was that all of this resistance I had to change was keeping me clinging to the things that no longer serve me, instead of just letting them go. What I realized was that disruption can also cause you to not take the risks that you'd be better off taking because they were more in line with who you are. I'd missed that. I'd missed that part of me. It was about taking risk and being fierce. So instead of resisting, I'd offer you this second F, which is to be fluid. And in this context, fluid means being open to change, being open to disruption, being curious about what these disruptions are about for you. Being fierce, the first F, and being forgiving, both, serve as a powerful catalyst for wisdom and growth. Being fierce and fluid assures that you neither conform to stay safe, and it also assures that you're not rebelling just to be provocative. You see, life is a laboratory. You are going to make a lot of mistakes. You are going to fail over and over and over again. And what I would tell you, as long as you are making new mistakes, embrace failure, because this is the way that you grow. This is the way you learn. Mistakes are a part of life, and it's part of being human. I had a friend of mine once say, she's 73 years old, so she's a lot younger than General Sherman. But she said, you know what, I think I'm finally starting to figure out this whole life thing. At 73. So what does that tell you about life? Well, here's the secret. None of us have it all figured out. None of us ever have it all figured out. We're always growing, we're always changing, we're constantly learning about life, becoming wiser and wiser over the course of our lifetime. So mistakes are part of that, right? So when I finally had a chance to kind of look back on my life and think about that high school girl that was fierce, that was willing to take risks, and how I lost that along the way, that my heart had become calcified from all of that fear I was experiencing after my father had passed. I look back now and I say, wow, in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, I would have never imagined the life I have. It is script-free, it is unclear, it's been uncertain in every possible way. And it is the best life I could have ever possibly hoped for. Because what I did is, instead of continuing to resist change, I got out of the way. I let go of those scripts. And life came to me. Life brought me to a place that is way more rewarding than anyone could have ever told me when I was young, or younger. So today, at the core of everything I do, at the heart of everything I do, is human rights. I help people heal from unimaginable traumas. And I couldn't be doing that if I had not gone through all of those disruptions. So I am grateful for every experience that has happened to me in my life. It's made me who I am today. It's allowed me to be this healer for other people, to help them liberate themselves from all of that trauma and from their own disruptions in life, and find their way back to their own, what I call the original blueprint, that self we were before all of the disruption happens. So, when you find yourself being disrupted, interrupted by life, when life sends you down a path that you could have never imagined for yourself, remember those 3 guiding qualities. Embrace your fierceness, be fluid, and be forgiving. And if you do that, you will find your way back to yourself. Thank you.